Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where you look at every classic Doctor Who story plus a bunch of big Finnish audio dramas one up to today, 7 days a week. Now, before we begin, I'd just like to take a quick moment to remind all of my viewers that because in 2019 YouTube was caught data mining the information of younger underage users, therefore violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, aka COPPA. They put in policy in place to scapegoat creators and dodge responsibility, meaning that I have to make sure that it is known that this video is not intended for children. Yes, Doctor Who is in fact a family show that children can watch, but this video, as with all the videos on my channel, are coming from a more adult perspective and could be discussing potentially adult themes and ideas. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, that being said, today on the 24th, not the 26th, the 24th of March 2020, we are starting a look at the first installment in the 2016 Fifth Doctor trilogy, and what has been dubbed the Season 20 trilogy because it's been the main range trilogy that's featured the Season 20, the Tegan and Nyssa TARDIS crew, The Waters of Amsterdam, with Part 1 written by Jonathan Morris. Okay, Part 1 is actually a perfect example of an episode where very little actually happens, but it uses its time perfectly. The episode runs at about 25 minutes long, and has stars Peter Davison, Sarah Sutton, and Janet Fielding in Amsterdam right after Arc of Infinity. They haven't even gotten to the TARDIS, and things are already wrong because Tegan is catching up with the Doctor, Nyssa, and her ex-boyfriend of 2 months shows up. He dated with this guy called this guy for 2 months, who was a real self-starter and a businessman. Owned fancy cars and a fancy apartment, and was essentially just in general almost upper class, out of Tegan's league. But fell in love with Tegan, and Tegan broke up with him because this is Tegan, and almost in her, and it's Jonathan Morris clearly understands the character's abrasiveness. There's jokes made that she doesn't understand necessarily how to have a stable, loving relationship, which I think is just hilarious, but sadly kind of accurate. It kind of is. But yeah, his name's Kyle, and basically they end up going to a museum to try to avoid him, throughout this first episode, and that's basically what it is. And then there's just a bunch of flashbacks to what Tegan's been doing in the time between Time Flight and Arc of Infinity. She was fired from her job for being a loudmouth to a rich guy, and for standing up for a guy, and she wasn't entirely mad at it because, this is Tegan, and yeah, it's the other joke, because there are things that are done really, really interestingly, and really done in just a really fun way, because it's like, okay, here we have all of these characters playing around with things, and you really, really get to do something new and exciting with them as they as you deal with this new situation. And just the flashbacks are fun to listen to. Both parties tell bits of the flashbacks, and it streamlines right into one into the other, making the transitions really smooth. This story was actually directed by Jamie Anderson, who directed Cold Fusion. Is the one big thing that I remember we've covered of his directing, and his directing style is actually kind of a breath of fresh air after all of the Fifth Doctor and Nyssa stuff. It's very light, things are moving along. A lot of the music, um, is very, very, again, Dutch in style. I don't think there are any cues from Arc of Infinity um, used necessarily in the story, but there are at least enough bits of interesting little bits here and there, But you have all this stuff. But meanwhile, you have actually this is going to be a story about the artist Rembrandt, who it seems has created artwork that depicts a spaceship. Um, you know, like spaceships that are accurate. So, there's that mystery that gets tucked away. And the idea is that it's actually not generally known, so it's probably a new change in history, the Doctor says, giving Peter Davison something fun to do. And this character of Kyle, he really is, fun to play around with. With the Doctor, Nyssa, and Tegan, because it creates a four-person dynamic, because Nyssa and Tegan then run away, go off to do their thing, the Doctor and Kyle do their thing as they come across this statue that looks like it's made out of water, and it's actually flowing, and surprise, it attacks them, so they run away, and it's only after the four of them, which is, an interesting observation, which, asks questions, what's going on here? And being attacked is basically where we leave, with a very, very classic Who style monster reveal cliffhanger, which I think, which I think is, which is just a good way of ending things. So overall, I'm going to give part 1 of The Waters of Amsterdam a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 25th of March 2020, and I just finished listening to part 2 of The Waters of Amsterdam. This second episode of the story is good for a few reasons. First, it moves us right to Amsterdam as a setting. In the past, to meet Rembrandt and play around with the Knicks. Second, it really does a good job of building up a story based around a couple of things, mainly like who the Knicks are, what they want, and of course some actual stuff, and what's with Rembrandt's paintings. And 3, it actually addresses some perhaps things the audience was thinking throughout part 1. So part 1, you have, Tegan's ex-boyfriend show up with, with a, with Kyle showing up, kind of, and having Kyle show up, and having the Knicks, Knicks, or these water villains, that's what they're called, and revealed to be in this episode, are built to really, really go on to be this idea of a you get the idea that Kyle might actually be the one behind this. And as soon as they're in the TARDIS, the Doctor gets Tegan to take him further into the TARDIS so he can have him, analyzed, so that so that so that we can figure out, okay, is this character evil? Is he an alien? is this all something? It's something that I think is really, really solid with, um, with doing something like this. Um, like it's an excellent little, um, it creates it answers some questions that we might have had. It's like, okay, so he's human, so we are back, um, you know back in what is, um, what is essentially this, with this, um, with just this idea and all this cool, interesting stuff going on, because of it, and you run with it. Like, we go back to see Rembrandt, but a lot of this episode stops to actually take in the historical period, which is really, really fun and really, really interesting. It it creates an entire, an entire story that's done to do this sort of a plot line where you have, you have the characters, um, going up to this idea, like Nyssa and Tegan are thought to be spies, because they all split up from the Nyx, and are arrested, and there's this countess lady, who is an alien, and the Nyx have followed her to Earth, and she's doesn't seem to quite be evil, but she's just trying to sort of live a life on Earth. And the portrayal of Rembrandt is brilliant. The character is given a life and some real energy, as there's this, as just this, you get this entire series of ideas, from the characters who, you have the idea, and it is, you know, you have something differently. Um, it's a, and the way Rembrandt is just sort of this grumpy, like, he's almost like an internet artist listing out, like, here's what I charge and no extra people. It's this nice bit of humor that gets injected into the story that I think is really, really solid and really, really just fun to hear. It's this great thing where there are, where you have the entire story. It's a, it's definitely, a long things, thing of what, the characters can be, because there is just this really, really interesting idea, it's really, really it's just a solid world building episode, and it creates, and as soon as you think it's going to slow down for a bit, then the next show up to move the things right along, so you keep the story going, and you keep the characters invested, and you keep things moving in a way that you can really get into this episode and really get what Jonathan Morris is doing. So overall, I'm going to give part 2 of The Waters of Amsterdam a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 25th of March 2020, and I just finished listening to part 3 of The Waters of Amsterdam. Part 3 is interesting because a lot of stuff changes in part 3. There's a lot of revelations about Kyle, about the Countess, who's being, obviously being chased, and was chased through time here, and is kind of trying to get back to her own planet, but of course has ulterior motives because this is a Doctor Who story. There's still that, duplicitous nature of everything, with the characters in the story that I think are really, really, that are really, really interesting, because, playing around with duplicity is always fun. I will say Jonathan Morris doesn't, actually, no, we're going to start with just the one or two little minor problems that I have with this story. One of them being the big fact that this is a story where this third episode is just a bit too long. It's longer than the other episodes in the story. And, it doesn't there are definitely things that could be cut out nicely, for just about everything. It's, it plays around with interesting things and some fun stuff. You have the characters playing around. You're playing around with the idea, but it's still just a little long. But other than that, there's still a lot of great stuff that Jonathan Morris, applies to this story. He reveals that Kyle is actually an android working for the Countess, which is fascinating, and it really makes him feel manipulative. It goes a long way to explain why he proposed marriage to Tegan, after 2 months of knowing her. Isn't why. It explains a lot of things in the first 2 episodes of just the story of why he's insistent on staying with the Doctor that you don't entirely think of. It's a really well forecasted twist, and a good example of how to employ a twist like this. Overall, even if the big ending twist isn't perfect, the Countess is actually, he's been working for the Countess. They've also been paying Rembrandt to build these paintings, basically to alter the course of history. And much like Pyramids of Mars, we go back to the future, though this time at gunpoint. So not like proving a point. Oh shoot! Now we have to deal with this alternate timeline, where there's a Dutch Galactic Trading Corporation, which is genuinely a hilarious idea, just because it's okay, this is something completely out of the blue, and something completely just different, though obviously, well set up, and built up with the whole idea with Rembrandt's paintings, but it's an interesting way of just moving the story along to a final episode, because it does move things to the end here. We are in essentially the end game of the story. The story has built up to this point, and obviously will continue building, as it stands to kind of be a be a different sort of plot because of it. It's you create something new and something different. Um, it's it's one of those it's one of those things where um, you know uh, you know it's it's a different thing. Um, you know, it's a different thing where there is, for the story, um, like you create the idea, and you create um, this plot to go on. Um, you know, it creates something new, um, and something completely different for um, for the story to be, and for the story to do, to create, just to create this different um, this different this differentiation of the story. You know, it's it's a um, it's something different, and playing something new. And the Knicks themselves are a cool idea, and you take it right to something. You just switch the episode, and it just creates a really really solid story. So overall, I'd have to give part 3 of The Waters of Amsterdam a 9 out of 10. All right, it is the 27th of March 2020, and I just finished listening to part 4 of The Waters of Amsterdam, which is a great conclusion with quite a few gut punches. Um, it is a story that ends, you know, that ends a lot of stuff pretty well. Um, it's there's a lot of fun stuff done with Jonathan Morris with the alternate future setting. Um, because this is, well, it's actually an alternate 1983, so you get to see, like this different, this different idea, um, for what the story does. Um, you have the Knicks going everything else. You have the Countess being evil, and just a bunch of different plot lines intersecting for this final episode. You know, because you do have a story taking place, um, with with this plot. Um, it's it's doing something. It's doing the different sort of plot, and the different ideas being played around with, um, and different things going on as we build to a conclusion. But where the episode really shines is actually the character drama between Tegan and Kyle, because Kyle, he's an android who perhaps was made too much to love, um, and he tries to actually still get Tegan back to um, to at least give him a chance, and Tegan doesn't, because one, she's not ready for that sort of commitment, but also isn't is one of those characters who Kyle's one of those characters who being an android has basically been given a sort of human life, and Tegan offers the Doctor to reprogram him, and make it so that he's no longer this character that has only this half life and wouldn't remember falling in love with Tegan, which is almost kind. It's not the most kind thing Tegan could have done, but it's a gesture of kindness, and it is a gesture like this that you really get to see what the character can do, and it's Janet Fielding plays it very, very well. She's excellent in the part and excellent at writing everything. It's doing the something different, and something weird and something darker. I really do enjoy a lot of what the episode does. It's not perfect. Again, the entire stuff with the stuff in the past is more interesting than the stuff in the alternate present. Just because it's one of those things where it's like you've already kind of done something like this. So it's not necessarily the best thing. It's different. Because it is different, and it is creating something weird. So overall, I would give Part 4 of The Waters of Amsterdam a 9 out of 10. That being said, we add the scores, and I'm to give The Waters of Amsterdam a final score of 9.5 out of 10. Thank you everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next time when we take a look at the 5th Doctor's installment in the 40th Anniversary Villains Trilogy with Omega.